When the storm came, everyone told me to leave. The doctors, the guards, even the hospital director. They all said the same thing. Maria, you have to go. It's not safe anymore. I remember standing in the dark hallway, holding a flashlight that flickered every few seconds. The wind outside howled like a living thing. It pressed against the windows, hard, as if it was trying to come in. The power had gone out hours ago. The backup generator was tired, barely keeping the machines alive. The patients were scared. You could feel it. That heavy silence, the kind that fills the air when everyone's too afraid to speak. I wanted to leave. I swear I did. My little sister had called earlier, crying. "Please, Maria," she said. "Just come home. Forget the hospital." Her voice cracked when she said it. And for a moment, I almost gave in. But then I looked at them. 6 patients on my floor. 2 couldn't move at all. One was a little boy, barely 9. His small chest rising and falling beneath a mess of wires. I whispered to myself, "You can do this, Maria. Just one more night." I wasn't brave. Not really. I was terrified. But something inside me wouldn't let me run. Maybe it was duty. Maybe love. Or maybe it was simply that quiet voice nurses carry deep inside. The one that says, "Stay. Just a little longer." So that night, I stayed behind. And that choice changed everything. Because when the storm finally reached us, it wasn't just the building that shook. It was me. Everything I believed in, courage, faith, even God, was tested in those long, endless hours. I didn't know if I'd live to see sunrise. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't leave them behind. So I tied my hair back, grabbed my flashlight, and stepped into the dark corridor. Each step echoed like a heartbeat. And as the storm roared outside, I whispered a prayer, not for myself, but for those who couldn't pray anymore. Before that night, my life was simple, quiet, predictable, in a comforting way. I had worked at St. Mary's Hospital for 7 years. Small town, modest building, faces I knew by heart. We weren't just co-workers, we were family. There was Dr. Lopez, calm, patient, always smiling, no matter how long the shift was. And Elena, the youngest nurse on our team, full of energy and questions. She reminded me of myself when I first started. I lived alone in a small apartment near the sea. It wasn't much, a table, 2 chairs, 1 creaky fan. But it was mine. Every morning, I'd walk to the hospital before sunrise. The smell of salt and rain in the air. I'd grab coffee from the corner shop, greet the night guard, and start my shift. Life wasn't perfect, but it was steady. And steady was enough. Then came the warnings. First, small. A storm forming off the coast. Then, louder. Category 4, they said. Maybe 5. The hospital prepared. But not everyone took it seriously. We'd seen storms before. They came, they went, and life carried on. But this one was different. The calm before. 2 days before the storm. The air changed. You could feel it. Thick, heavy, electric. Even the birds were gone. We moved patients from the east wing to the center hall. Windows were sealed, sandbags placed by the doors. I helped tape plastic over glass, my fingers trembling slightly, though I didn't want anyone to see. That night, I sat in the break room with Elena. The lights flickered above us, and she asked, "Do you think it'll be bad?" I smiled, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Storms pass," I said. "They always do." But inside, a quiet fear began to grow. By the next evening, the sky had turned dark. Not gray, but black. The kind of dark that swallows everything. The wind began to scream through the trees outside. And the rain didn't fall in drops anymore. It slammed against the windows. The hospital lost power once, then twice. Each time, the lights returned weaker. Dr. Lopez called an emergency meeting in the hallway. Anyone who wants to leave, he said, should do it now. The roads will close within the hour. No one spoke at first. Then slowly, one by one, people began to pack. I watched them, nurses, aides, staff. They weren't cowards. They were human. They had families waiting, children at home. But something in me refused to move. I turned to Elena and said, "You should go. You're young. You don't need to be here." She looked at me, eyes wide, scared, and whispered, "Not without you." I almost smiled. Almost. Then Dr. Lopez said quietly, "Maria, please, think about it." And I did. For a long, silent minute. The kind of silence that stretches and bends time. Finally, I said, "If they can't leave, then I won't." Underscore 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 underscore. The storm arrives. When the last ambulance left, we closed the main gate and locked it. The wind was already tearing at the doors. Inside, the halls grew colder. Every sound echoed. A cough, a whisper, the creak of ceiling beams. We gathered flashlights, checked oxygen tanks, and prayed the backup generator would hold. It didn't. At 11:47 p.m., the power died completely. The hospital fell into blackness. Someone screamed from the lower floor. Dr. Lopez ran toward the stairwell, his flashlight shaking in his hand. I stayed behind with the patients. I could barely see their faces, only the faint outline of monitors fading into dark. I took the boy's hand, Daniel, his skin cold and damp with fear. He whispered, "Am I going to die?" My voice broke when I answered, "No, sweetheart. You're going to live. You hear me? You're going to live." That's when I heard it. The roof, tearing like paper. Wind howling through the ceiling vents. We ran, dragging beds into the hallway, stacking mattresses against doors, trying to shield what little we could. Hours passed like minutes. Minutes felt like forever. Sometimes I closed my eyes and counted my own heartbeats, just to remind myself I was still here. And through it all, I kept thinking, if I die tonight, at least they won't be alone. At some point, the storm began to quiet. Not stop, just soften. Like an angry thing finally running out of breath. We had made it through the worst of it. But I knew. It wasn't over. Not yet. When the wind finally eased, the silence felt wrong. Too sudden. Too deep. I stood in the corridor, flashlight trembling in my hand, listening for anything that sounded like life. The hospital moaned softly, old walls shifting, water dripping through cracks. But beneath that, I heard something else. A faint beep, then another, then silence. My heart dropped. I ran toward room 7, Daniel's room, and found the monitor dead. The generator had failed again. The boy's chest moved faintly, his lips pale, his breath shallow. For a moment, I froze. Every nurse knows that fear. The second your mind screams do something but your body refuses to move. Then instinct took over. I pressed the manual resuscitator, counting quietly between each squeeze. 1, 2, 3. Again. I whispered, "Come on, Daniel, come on." Elena appeared in the doorway, soaked and shaking. "Maria, the lower floor's flooding," she said. "Water's rising fast." I didn't stop pressing the bag. "Get everyone to the west wing," I said. "Now." She nodded, eyes wide, and disappeared down the hall. For the next few minutes, I worked alone. Just me, Daniel, and the storm's quiet breathing beyond the walls. When his chest finally rose on its own, I almost cried. But there was no time. I grabbed his chart, tore out the 4 lines. and wheeled him toward the west wing. The hallway was half submerged now. Water reached my knees, cold, black, carrying pieces of ceiling plaster. I pushed harder, each step heavier than the last. The flashlight flickered again. I whispered, "Just a little more, just a little more." And somehow, we made it. Underscore 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 underscore. The second shock. When I reached the West Wing, Elena had gathered the remaining patients there. Dr. Lopez was on the floor, trying to restart another monitor by hand. He looked up as I entered. "Power's completely gone," he said. "We'll have to keep them alive manually until morning." Morning? It sounded like a lifetime away. We divided the work. He took the critical cases. I watched the children. The hours blurred. Rain. Breathing. Whispers. The sound of life holding on by threads. At some point, I caught my reflection in the glass. Hair matted, uniform soaked, eyes hollow. I barely recognized myself. That's when I heard it. A cracking sound above. I looked up just as the ceiling began to sag. Water poured through, and before I could shout, the section collapsed. Screams. Chaos. Darkness again. When the dust settled, Elena was gone. I called her name. Over and over, voice breaking with each try. Finally, a faint cry answered from beneath debris. "Maria, I'm here." I dropped to my knees, pushing chunks of ceiling aside with bare hands. Her leg was pinned, blood everywhere. "Don't move," I said, tears mixing with rainwater. "We'll get you out." Dr. Lopez ran in with a crowbar, and together, we lifted the beam. She screamed once, then fell quiet. I pressed my fingers to her neck. A pulse, weak but there. I wrapped her leg as tight as I could, and whispered, "Stay with me, okay? Just stay." She nodded faintly, eyes filled with pain, and something else. Trust. That was the moment I realized. No rescue was coming. We were the rescue. Underscore 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 underscore. The night's longest hour. Around 3 a.m., the storm began to fade for real. The wind quieted. The rain thinned to a whisper. But inside the hospital, it was still chaos. We had patients in hallways, leaks in ceilings, and one dying generator coughing its last sparks. I sat beside Elena, checking her bandages every few minutes. Her eyes fluttered open once, and she whispered, "You stayed." I smiled weakly. Of course. Nurses always stay. Outside, the first pale light of dawn began to touch the windows. Not warm, not golden, just gray. But it was light. For the first time in hours. I let myself breathe. And then, I heard something. A sound that didn't belong. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, coming from the east corridor. The one we'd sealed off. Dr. Lopez and I exchanged a look. He whispered, "No one should be there." I stood, heart pounding. The flashlight beam trembled as I turned toward the sound. "Hello," I called. No answer. Only another step. Closer. And that's when I saw it. A shadow moving through the broken glass, dragging something behind it. For a heartbeat, the world froze. And I realized, the storm had taken lives. But it had also left something behind. Something we didn't understand. That was the moment the night truly changed. The storm outside had ended. But the one inside was just beginning. When morning came, it didn't look like morning, just a dull gray light pushing through the broken windows, touching everything with the color of ash. The rain had stopped, but the sound of dripping water filled every hallway. Slow, rhythmic, like the hospital itself was trying to breathe again. I stood by the west wing doorway, watching the world outside. Trees uprooted, cars overturned, the road gone completely underwater. It didn't look like our town anymore. Dr. Lopez and I began checking rooms. We moved slowly, careful with every step. Each door we opened felt like a memory we weren't ready to face. Some patients were alive, some weren't. We didn't cry. Not yet. There wasn't time. We covered the bodies with sheets and whispered their names softly, like saying goodbye in pieces. When we finally reached the east corridor, the one where I'd seen the shadow, the door was half torn from its hinges. I raised the flashlight, heart tight in my chest. Inside, water still pooled across the floor, and in the middle of it, a man sat slumped against the wall. His clothes were soaked, face pale, hands trembling. It was the security guard, Thomas. He looked up at me with empty eyes and said, I tried to get them out. I knelt beside him. Who? He pointed weakly toward the far room. That's when I saw them. 2 patients, still in their beds, untouched since the storm began. He had stayed, just like us. But the floodwater had risen too fast. I felt my throat tighten. There were no words that could make it right. So I did the only thing I could. I held his hand, and for a long time, we just sat there. The storm had taken too much, but somehow, it had left us with something even heavier. Silence. Underscore 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 underscore. The long walk. By noon, rescue teams finally reached us. Boats came through what used to be streets. They found us standing by the hospital gate, exhausted, soaked, and silent. Elena was taken first. She was alive, barely, but alive. Dr. Lopez followed with the remaining patients. When they asked if I needed help, I shook my head. I'll stay, I said. I need to see this through. They didn't understand, but they didn't argue either. So I walked through the hospital one last time, room by room, bed by bed, touching walls that still echoed with the night's memories. Every light flicker, every scream, every prayer, they were all still here. I stopped by room 7, Daniel's bed. Empty now. He'd been taken to safety earlier. On the floor, I noticed something small, a folded piece of paper, half soaked, stuck beneath a chair leg. I picked it up carefully. It was a drawing, a child's sketch of a nurse with a flashlight, standing in the rain. At the bottom, in shaky handwriting, it said, "Thank you for not leaving me." That's when I broke. All the fear, all the strength I'd been holding, it all fell apart. I sat on the wet floor, crying like I hadn't in years. Not from pain, but from knowing that staying had mattered. Underscore 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 underscore. Days later, I stood outside what was left of St. Mary's. The roof was gone. The halls were open to the sky. But somehow, it still felt sacred. Reporters came. Cameras. Questions. They called us heroes. But I didn't feel like one. Heroes are strong. I had been scared every second. When one of them asked me, "Why didn't you leave?" I looked at the broken building behind me and said quietly, "Because someone had to stay." Weeks passed. The hospital was never rebuilt. But I still visit the spot sometimes. When it rains, I bring flowers. For the ones who didn't make it. For Elena's courage. For Thomas's loyalty. And for that little boy, who taught me that sometimes, saving one life, is enough reason to face the storm. I still hear the rain some nights. It doesn't scare me anymore. It reminds me that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about staying when everyone else has gone. And maybe, just maybe, that's what faith really is. It's been 3 years since that night. 3 long years since the storm took our little hospital and changed everything I thought I knew about strength. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still see the flickering lights in the hallway. I still hear the wind howling through broken windows. And I still feel that moment. The moment I realized that staying could mean dying. But leaving would have meant something worse. After the storm, people told me I was brave, that I did something extraordinary. But I don't think so. I think bravery often looks smaller than we imagine. It looks like tired hands that keep working. It looks like a quiet whisper saying, "Don't give up yet." It looks like love. Love for strangers, for your patience, for life itself. I still remember Daniel, the boy who drew that picture. He recovered. Months later, his mother found me. She hugged me for a long time, and all she said was, "You gave me my son back." Those words have stayed with me ever since. They reminded me that what we do, even when no one sees it, even when it feels too small, can mean everything to someone else. There are moments in life when you'll feel completely alone, when everything around you seems to collapse, when you wonder if it's even worth staying. And in those moments, I hope you remember this story. Remember that one ordinary nurse, in one forgotten hospital, chose to stay when everyone else had gone, not because she wasn't afraid, but because love gave her a reason stronger than fear. I used to think storms were something to survive, but now, I know, they are also something to learn from. They show us what's fragile. They strip away what doesn't matter. And sometimes, they leave us with only what's real. Faith, kindness, and the will to stay. When people ask me now if I'd do it again, if I'd stay behind, knowing the danger, I always smile and say, yes, every time. Because that night, I didn't just save lives. That night saved me. I learned that even the smallest acts, holding a hand, whispering a prayer, standing still in the face of chaos, can become the strongest light in someone else's darkness. So if you ever find yourself in a storm, of any kind, the kind that tears roofs apart, or the kind that breaks your heart, remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply to stay. Thank you for listening, and wherever you are, whatever storm you're facing tonight, I hope you find your reason to stay, too. This was Maria's story, a simple nurse who stayed when the world was falling apart. She didn't do it for praise. She did it out of love, for her patience, for her duty, for what was right. If her story touched your heart tonight, take a moment to think about the quiet heroes in your own life. The ones who stay, who care, who never give up. Tell them thank you, because sometimes the smallest kindness can mean everything to someone else. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps these voices reach someone who might need them tonight.